Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lessons Learned in Implementing Electronic Tools in the Field. I'm Amanda Hopping-Wynn, Director here at the National Abandoned Infants Assistance Resource Center, located at the University of California at Berkeley. Today's webinar will be presented by Julie Moore and Pam Shoemaker. Julie Moore is an evaluator at MPHI. Trained as a developmental psychologist, she has a range of research experiences with children and families across many ages and settings. Dr. Moore has been active on many projects involving at-risk children and families and is particularly interested in understanding the factors that promote positive development. Pam Shoemaker is the team lead for the AIA-funded Mission In project at Arbor Circle in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She supervises a team comprised of therapists, a case manager, and a peer recovery coach, as well as provides direct service to families. She is endorsed as an infant mental health specialist and serves on the board of directors for the Michigan Association for Infant Mental Health. Before we begin, I want to remind you all that you may ask your questions via the chat feature in the lower left portion of the screen. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to chat them in at any point. And now I'd like to turn it over to Pam. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. Our agenda for today will start with an introduction to the Mission In project. We'll then look at our journey from paper to electronic data collection. We'll explore the benefits and challenges for both therapists and the evaluation team of that process, and then look at programmatic considerations for adopting electronic data collection systems. And at the end, we'll have time for questions. The Mission In program provides home-based wraparound services to pregnant women and mothers of young children. The women in the program have a history of substance use or a current issue with substance use. Our wraparound model includes a therapist, case manager, and peer recovery coach, and services are provided in the home of the families for a period of up to 2 years. This next graph here takes a look at the varying numbers of clients that the program has served over the years. Our program began in 1998 with a total of 19 clients served and peaked with a high of between 68 and 69 clients per year between 2005 and 2007. In 2009, the program switched to an experimental design with random assignment to either a control or study group, and this shift had a significant impact on the number of clients served. The referral sources in our community were used to making direct referrals to the Mission In program and were then hesitant to refer, not knowing if clients would receive the Mission In model. So at this time, program staff did a lot of outreach and education in the community so we could build those numbers back up. Our randomized control design takes a look at the difference between the infant mental health model and the Mission In model. In our infant mental health model, clients receive services from a master's level infant mental health trained therapist, and the focus of the services is on strengthening parent-child relationships. In the Mission In model, the therapist is trained in infant mental health as well as substance use disorder treatment. And in addition to the therapist, clients have access to a case manager that helps with basic needs, housing searches, employment assistance, and linking to other community resources. And a peer recovery coach is also available to support clients in their recovery. And this additional support from someone with similar lived experiences has been very powerful for the families in the Mission In model. Mission In also has intensive engagement strategies, including flexible requirements about when and how often clients must meet with staff in order to remain in the program. In the infant mental health model, that's a little more dictated by the funding source. The Mission In model also has general funds available to assist clients with basic needs. So being able to help with things like food, rent, gas, or bus passes could often ease some of the stress of daily issues so families could have time to focus on parenting and the parent-child relationship. And the final difference is Mission In families can receive services for up to 2 years. And in the infant mental health model, that is really dictated by the funding source, and most of the families in the infant mental health model average about 9 to 12 months of services. So this next slide just takes a little look at our data collection schedule and how our project collects data. So at intake, the client is randomly assigned to either the study or control group, and then within 30 days of that intake, the 10 or so items listed under time 1 are completed by either the therapist or research coordinator. Initially, all of these documents were completed on paper and then mailed to our off-site evaluation team, which is in Okemos, which is about an hour or so from our site in Grand Rapids. So the same thing would happen at time 2, which is about a year later from time 1, and then again at time 3, which is another year later, and then at discharge. So what this added up to was a lot of paper being sent back and forth between the program staff and our off-site evaluation team. During this time, our agency was also converting to electronic health records. However, we maintained paper charts for our Mission In clients due to the large amount of paper research documents that we were gathering for those clients. Now I will hand it off to Julie.
Thanks, Pam. I'll be discussing first our journey from paper to electronic data collection. Again, in the beginning, our process looked pretty typical, starting with completing paper forms with clients at a visit, returning to the office to photocopy or scan forms and send them to the off-site evaluators. This process often took a while, despite the fact that we took the post office's advice from maybe the 1900s, and we did have a mailbox. Evaluation staff would then enter the data into a spreadsheet, and checking for errors or omissions would often happen weeks to months after that initial client visit. We started using REDCap, the Research Electronic Data Capture System that was developed out of Vanderbilt University at the start of this grant cycle in 2013. The Michigan Public Health Institute, where the evaluation staff are housed, is a partnering organization for REDCap and had been utilizing it for various projects. It seemed like it would be a great fit for Mission In and provided some big benefits, including automating our random assignment process, building a platform for project management, and easing data entry burden. Anyone who's spent any time doing data entry knows that entering into electronic forms is much easier and less error-prone than entering raw data into a spreadsheet. But there was still a ways to go. Our client visits were still done with paper forms. We were still having to transfer files between therapists and the off-site evaluation team, and there was still a time lapse between visits and data entry. It wasn't until last year that we were able to close that final gap and move to a direct data entry system in the field. Mission In evaluators and therapists were together at the 2015 AIA meeting last spring. We heard our New York colleagues describing their experiences transitioning to iPads from paper forms for their project work. At the time, they described how they were filling out forms electronically, but still had to print out the forms for data entry into a data analysis program. We had been using REDCap for some time and saw how they could potentially use a system like it to do direct data entry in the field. Our eureka moment went something like this. The evaluators were asking if they had tried anything similar to REDCap. You could do direct data entry into your forms. We use it, but we haven't used it in the field yet. I guess we could if we had iPads. And then our Mission In therapists, who were sitting right next to us, said, hey, we do have iPads. So thanks, AIA, for getting us together in a room in the right context with the right conversation for making that link. So after we figured out this was a possibility for us, we began a process for adapting to full field use. We worked in close collaboration with our therapists to understand which features they wanted and needed. The comic on the right describes the exact experience we were trying to avoid. After years of hard work, our data system is up and running. Have you discovered anything interesting? Yes. Nobody wants to use it. So we took pains to collaborate fully and make sure that the system was something that would be highly functional for everybody and it wasn't just an exercise to go through. We made the forms more visually appealing, including adding complete form language instead of the abbreviations or shortcuts that were adequate for data entry use. And we also made much more use of things like section breaks, HTML tags, and other formatting options to make the forms easier to read. We included more advanced functionality in the forms. This includes branching and skip logic, automatic scoring for scales using calculated fields, and individualized feedback based on those scores. We took a long time to test and implement the new system. We used a slow rollout to test the direct data entry process. The therapist selected 2 of our simpler forms to try on the iPads first on several visits to get a feel for logging in and completing them electronically. Once we got positive feedback, the remaining forms were built for field use. Now I'll hand it back over to Pam for exploring the benefits and challenges that they experience for the therapist.
So starting out with incorporating new technology, as I mentioned earlier, our agency around this time had converted to electronic health records and had provided iPads for our home-based staff. So we already had the necessary technology. Staff did have different comfort levels with new technology and how much this was being used in the field. So this was an adjustment based on how comfortable people were with using technology. So the first issue, connectivity off-site. Our agency uses a wireless data plan through our wireless provider for the staff iPads. So this eliminates the need for a Wi-Fi connection, which most of our clients do not have in their homes. Our service area includes both urban and rural areas, and we've had very few problems with a connectivity issue with the internet connection. The system RedCap that we use, being web-based, eliminates the need for us to connect to our agency network, which could be a potential challenge. Backup plans. There are a lot of unforeseen or maybe foreseen events that come up, like forgetting to charge the iPad, leaving the iPad in the hot car and not being able to get it to turn on, forgetting your login or password. So just to prevent, or in the event of some of those things happening, staff try to have paper copies of the forms available just as a backup. Client records are easily accessible. So in the system, client numbers are very easy to locate. It's easy to enter, so you're in the right person's chart. It's really easy to see which forms have already been completed, which ones are partially completed or not started yet. Forms can be saved even if it's not complete. So the benefit to this is it helps if more than one person is collecting data on the same family. So someone can pick up where another person left off if you weren't able to complete a particular form during one visit. Reduced prep time. Our research coordinator previously spent countless hours making copies of all the forms, putting together packets for each client, getting the correct packets to all of the staff members. So switching to electronic data collection has saved many, many hours of time in preparation of paper documents. Having the electronic forms also eliminates the problem of staff misplacing or forgetting to bring the paper forms before a home visit. Or perhaps we weren't planning to do any data collection on that visit, but the opportunity presented itself. If the iPad is there, we can just log in and collect some of the data that we need. User-friendly. The electronic forms look very similar to the paper forms that we had been using, thanks to a lot of hard work by our evaluation team. So again, staff that had some concerns about using technology in the field, this helped ease some of those concerns, having the user-friendly forms. The forms also, the skip logic that's used on the electronic forms is very helpful, so that the computer just skips the questions that don't need to be answered. And on paper, this was often confusing. So this made the forms a lot less complex for the users, for us as therapists and the research coordinator. If a question didn't apply, the computer would just skip to the next one. So incorporating new technology with clients. Screens can be both engaging and distracting. Parents and children use screens a lot in daily life. Everyone's on their phones, tablets, the TV. This can be helpful in engaging parents to complete forms. Sometimes it's a little more fun to use a touch screen than to use pen and paper. The downside can be that what's engaging to parents is also very engaging to children. So when they see their parent on the iPad, it's usually they're automatically drawn to it and want to touch it and use it as well. So a lot of times staff need to distract or play with the kids while parents are completing forms on the iPad. There are also health and germ considerations. Kids and parents might have sticky or less than clean hands and fingers, so just being prepared with sanitizing wipes to clean up the iPad after each session was something we found to be important. Protocols for using screens. The main consideration we had here was whether to have parents directly enter information on the iPad versus having staff reading the questions and answering themselves. And this is not different than pen and paper, but just an additional consideration. And we really approach this as a case-by-case decision. Parents have varying reading and comprehension levels and may prefer to have questions read aloud to them. In this situation, staff would keep the iPad and directly enter the information themselves. Some parents preferred to directly enter their answers. This often increased privacy if there were a lot of other people present in the home, and parents may not want other people to hear how they answered personal questions. On the other hand, if the parent is directly entering, this took away some of the staff's ability to sort of catch any potential errors in answers. For example, when therapists read the question and can tell a parent might be misunderstanding, staff had the opportunity to explain the question a little better to make sure we got a more accurate response. And again, that's not just an iPad issue, that could be a pen and paper issue as well. If the parent was answering directly on the iPad, though, these errors might not be caught. Another benefit we had was instant scoring and interpretation. So with instant scoring, this was a huge time saver for staff. Previously, when we were using pen and paper, scoring was very time consuming and didn't allow for instant feedback with clients. Staff would typically bring the paper forms back to the office to score, or our research coordinator would score for us. With the electronic forms, the results are available instantly. Staff also have access to previous scores and can provide instant feedback to parents on changes over time. So the example we have up here is one of the tools that we use, the Assist, which looks at substance use. So we could see where their score was the first time we did it and then pull up and see the next time. We could discuss progress, lack of progress, and that was not as easily available when we were doing the completion on paper. Immediate scoring allows staff to respond to area of concern in the moment, and this rarely happened with paper forms. So as we have up here with the alcohol beverage score, if someone popped up with a high-risk score, we could see that right away, and the therapist would be able to offer some intervention. This time I'm going to pass it back to Julie.
All right, now I'll be exploring some of the benefits and challenges that we experienced for the evaluation team. One of the biggest advantages of direct data entry into the online system for us was real-time data management. It's really hard to see Grand Rapids, Michigan from Okemos, Michigan, even with really great field binoculars. While our teams have maintained great phone, email, and in-person communication, the system allows us to monitor activity off-site in real time. This minimizes uncertainty about where we were as a project with current caseload, file transfers, and the data collection schedule. And it really increased the transparency between the therapists and the evaluation team about the state of data collection. A second benefit to using our online system in the field has been single-point data entry. Entering data only once minimizes data entry errors that are common when transferring responses from paper. I'm sure those of us who have spent any time trying to enter raw scores into a database that is, for example, lots of 1-1s instead of 1s and lots of getting off of the wrong question. So having these electronic forms have really helped to minimize those types of errors. The correct response values are coded into the form. This is a particular benefit for measures with complex coding structures, such as items that are reverse coded. We were also able to build in a check for missing values. Pam described and alluded to items that may have been missed over during client visits. The calculated fields that show the final scale scores are blank unless all items feeding into that score were complete. So this allows the therapist to check for complete measures during the visit. In the past, if items were missing, either intentionally or accidentally, on paper forms, they might not get caught until the point of data entry, which could be weeks after the visit with a client. Finally, single point data entry allows for more efficient use of staff time. There is less effort for organizing, transferring, and maintaining paper files. So you heard Pam alluding to all of the many hours that their research coordinator used to spend juggling paper. And on our end, evaluators, we can now focus on monitoring data quality and outcomes rather than spending a great deal of time entering and cleaning data. There are pros and cons to building a project-specific data collection system. As the comic here demonstrates, often you spend a lot of time trying to find something that works perfectly for your needs, only to realize that there are barriers to using it. So sometimes building your own is the way to go. Of course, there are time demands for building and testing your own system too. There are many small decisions that were made as we developed our project system, and it is important to take the time to thoroughly test any system you make to ensure it will work the way you want it to. When developing your own project system, you need to be mindful of copyrights. You need permissions to recreate electronic versions of copy-protected scales and materials. For example, Mission uses the PSI, the Parenting Stress Index. While there is a mechanism through the vendor to request permission to build an electronic version of the form, we decided it was not worth it at this time and opted to continue using the paper versions for this scale. Building your own system allows you to have a single system for all your project needs. We found that it was easier to build our own system within REDCap that allowed for the needs of our project. For example, incorporating the random assignment functionality and structuring our project to include the longitudinal design. Finally, having our own system allows us to stay flexible through programmatic shifts. It can be tricky and time-consuming to change measures partway through a project, but we managed several transitions since we had control of our data system. A great example of this was transitioning to the new AIA forms last year. We worked with the cross-site evaluation team when they rolled out the new forms to make sure our coding was consistent with their system for much easier data sharing. Right, and finally, we'll look at some programmatic considerations for adopting electronic data collection systems. All right, when might it be worth it? There are a couple of things to consider when it might be worth adopting a system such as the one we've been describing. We have found that being a multi-site project, and again, the multi-site for us, while all of the intervention is going on through one site, the evaluation was off-site. And one can easily imagine programs where programming is actually happening across many sites as well. And this type of system really helps with increased transparency and coordination in such a situation. There are, of course, infrastructure and technology issues. A system like this would work really well if your institution already has supported platforms and resources to troubleshoot and help develop systems. While we have become very effective users of REDCap, we definitely have times where we rely very heavily on our IT support team to help us with snags that we encounter. Budget, of course, could be an issue as well. Building systems takes time. It's important to consider the value added in savings in other areas such as time and accuracy. And the complex data collection schedules may really increase the value added for use of these forms. These systems can really help organize a complex project. Mission has rolling admissions with clients on their own timelines as they progress through the program. Our online system really helps to track the individual since everyone is on a slightly different schedule. And finally, as we've alluded to, forms with really complex skip logic or scoring, building such forms with these complicated logic and scoring systems into an online system really helps end users complete the forms more accurately and really decreases data entry and scoring errors. maybe not yet. These systems may not be a great fit for everyone. Some considerations, the first consideration might be whether it's a good fit for staff or clients. It really depends on the type of programming and outreach you might be doing. Pam alluded to different comfort levels of staff members with technology and transferring to technology. And the technology may interfere with some types of engagement depending on what the program is. Technology interfering with project work. If building and training and maintaining a project-specific data system is interfering with major program work, it may not be worth it. Budget infrastructure concerns. This is the flip side of if you have enough budget infrastructure to support a system like this, it could be great, but is there dedicated budget, staff, and infrastructure to build, test, and maintain these systems? Copyright or alternative systems is another consideration. If you use mostly copy-protected instruments or use instruments that have central electronic data systems, you may not need to build your own. For example, many programs use the EDECA, the Devereaux Early Childhood Assessment, which has its own online data collection system. And of course, if it ain't broke, sometimes it's easier to keep things simple. You may love your current system and it is working well for your project, and adoption of these systems really should respond to a problem or seek to improve accuracy and efficiency.
So Julie and I are not working alone on this. We both have teams working with us that include administrators, therapists, case manager, peer recovery coach, research assistants, and coordinators. So we just want to give a big thank you to everyone on both of our teams, both the Mission In staff at Arbor Circle and the evaluation team at Michigan Public Health Institute. That brings us to the end of our content, and we are open to questions at this point.
Great, thank you. I'm wondering if you can speak briefly to your timeline from the time you decided to implement the online data collection until you had the system up and running and were using it in the field. What were you looking at?
Sure. So I can start, and Pam can help fill in my memory gaps. Does that sound good? So I think it was in 2013, at the beginning of this grant cycle, that we implemented the REDCap system in sort of its halfway mode. So that's when we built the majority of our forms into the system. And so we used it for minimal program management, for understanding, and for the random assignment module, for being able to see how clients were progressing through the system. But we were still doing direct data entry into the system on the evaluation end of things. So they were still doing paper copies, sending them to us for direct data entry. And then it wasn't until, so we had our little eureka moment last spring in 2015, and then we did our slow rollout over the summer, I believe. And I think we launched, if memory serves, in September in coordination with the new AIA forms, because that was one of our last big shifts to adapt before everything was sort of with a bow on top. Does that sound right, Pam?
Yes. Yep, we started over the summer with, like Julie mentioned, a few of the simpler forms, and then when those went well, they continued to work on making the more complex forms user-friendly for us. And then in September, as a team, is when we officially began, from here on out, we're going to do it electronic data collection. So I guess officially from April till September.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually pretty impressive.
Oh, thanks.
That's actually a good rollout. So you said that you had the iPads before, using them in this capacity. How were you using them?
So we were using them for client record keeping, so like progress notes, our agency assessments that we did. So we had probably more challenges with that, and that was related to connecting to our agency network. So using them in this capacity was actually much easier. So I think some of the staff that were cautious about this transition were thinking in comparison to connecting to our agency network, which was a challenge. And then this system just being web-based, we did not have any of those challenges. And we also use the iPads for like looking up resources when we're in the client's home, so a lot of internet searching, assisting with like DHS applications online, employment searches with clients, even filling out job applications online with clients in the home that may not have internet access. So just having that available for staff just eliminated a barrier for a lot of our clients that would need to go elsewhere to use things on the internet.
That's wonderful.
So really for a variety of things that we were using the iPads for.
And then was there much staff resistance to doing the data collection in the field electronically, or was that an easy rollout?
I feel like it was fairly easy. Again, there was maybe a few staff that were a little more concerned about it, but as they practiced and realized that we really couldn't mess anything up, and with reassurance from our evaluation team that they'll figure it out if we did something maybe incorrectly the first time, I think that transition went better than expected for the staff that were more concerned about it. Then we had some staff that were like gung-ho from day one, like this will be great, much easier.
We didn't get into a lot of, our intention with this webinar wasn't to advertise REDCap, but that just happens to be the system we have access to. But one of the cool features is that we can control different levels of access depending on login. So one of the things that always makes new users feel better is that we disable their ability, for example, to delete records. So even if they it soothes a lot of anxiety that they're going to log in and wipe out like all of the programs worth of data. So we did a lot of back and forth with our initial journey into REDCap for us as a team, and then additionally walking into the direct data entry about managing those rights through logins so that everyone had access to everything they needed, but not so much access that they were getting into trouble. So I think we hit a good balance with that.
Did you encounter any need to enter additional interagency agreement around data sharing or to amend your IRB?
Let's see. We did as we were going through IRB renewals, we did amend our protocols around use of electronic data entry, and those went through very smoothly.
Great. Well, those are all the questions that we have at this point. Thank you both so much. This is a wonderful presentation. There is still time if anybody is interested in registering for our last 2 webinars in our Lessons Learned series brought to you by AIA grantees. You can sign up on our website. We have one immediately following this and then another one at 1 p.m. Pacific. Our website is right here, aia.berkeley.edu, and you can find it in the New and Noteworthy section on the lower portion of the screen. You will be receiving an email in just a few moments. In that email, there will be a link to an online evaluation. We'd love to get your feedback on this session. You'll also see a copy of the PowerPoint slides available for download in that email. But thank you to all the participants. And again, Julie and Pam, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Of course. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.